Good evening, and welcome to Nox Mente. Tonight's guest is Reverend Erik Arneson, magician and co-host of My Chemical Bromance podcast. Erik, welcome to the show. Good evening.
Welcome, Erik.
And welcome to Nox Mente.
Thanks, guys.
Here we go.
It's My Alchemical Bromance. You know, it's a bad. Yeah. Hi.
We like things alchemical and bromantical, so it works.
I like. I like the really old picture of me that you guys have up there. I'm way grayer now.
Distinguished. You're more distinguished.
I'm way more distinguished now.
But the mustache
but you still
looks
actually
identical.
look the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's hard to get rid of a mustache once you grow it.
Indeed.
It just keeps coming back.
It's quite nice in person, I must say.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Is it perky?
I do want to take a minute and say I love your podcast, and I think everyone should check it out. It's really great. You always come with a little bit of humor too, but it's so educational. I just listened to the one you sent me, which is older actually, from Azoth Press, Miskatonic Books.
Oh yeah, the one with Larry Roberts. Yeah, that was a really fun one.
Oh my God, it was so great. Really educational and just great. I love your podcast. I just want to give you that right away.
Well, thank you. So Larry, he actually did something really cool, which I've never seen a podcast guest do since, which is that he brought notes. So like when we ask questions, he would be like, he had something prepared, which is probably why it was so educational, is he wasn't just going from memory, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
And that was what was so juicy. I was just eating up all the alchemical talk that he was bringing forth, and the questions were intelligent. And also your questions came from a place of a layman, which is great because a lot of people don't understand the process. So whether or not you came from that naturally or were just playing the jester, it was good as a listener and someone who is into alchemy.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm blushing on the internet.
Yeah, but I see you. Hello, everyone in the chat. Hi, Jerry. I've missed you. We haven't talked much.
I know. You've been busy.
I know. So
I've been busy.
Yes. We've all been busy.
This train is wiping me out, so I was having to work 8 hours straight.
Oh my goodness, the
it's
world.
It's bad for the soul to work that much.
It's bad for my ass and back.
Your monastic life.
Yeah.
I'm gonna open this really tiny beer.
Oh, ooh, nice.
Wish I had a beer.
I'm envious. So let's get into the show. Nox Mente, here we come.
All right, ask me some tough questions. I'm ready for the tough ones.
I'm gonna drill down, Erik.
Are you a tranny?
No. If you are, I like you more. Okay, so do tell us about your life, your early life, and the symbols, the things that stick out now that are real vivid, the things that you feel may have imprinted upon you, the person that you are now.
Well, like all small birds, I was hatched not being able to fly, and I imprinted very strongly on the first bird that came along. But in reality, I mean, my early life, like that's a tough question. I remember, so my really early life, like I had a pretty active imaginary life. I didn't have any kids my age in the neighborhood when I was super young, and so I had like imaginary friends, and I remember one instance in particular where I was outside, and it was, probably fall or spring in Oregon. So there were like mushrooms in the yard. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, these mushrooms are building a little tiny city. That's the strong memory from my early days, I guess.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I remember in particular, the thing that really convinced me is that I found this little cluster of like 3 tiny mushrooms that I thought looked like a television camera. And I was like, oh my God, the mushrooms have television. So I don't think it was true.
Where's Papa Smurf?
Yeah. That was, I think, before I'd ever seen the Smurfs. I think that we still had a black and white television, and I'm not sure I'm not sure that the Smurfs were on TV yet. But
oh wait, pump the brake here. So you were in the days of black and white televisions?
Well, I mean, when you say,
I mean, I know you're not old enough for that, but
days of black and white televisions, I think it would be more accurate to say that my parents didn't buy us a color television. We had a black and white television that was very old and had been around for a long time, and it died before I was. It died probably when I was 3 or 4, maybe.
Yeah, I shared that in the basement. We had one. That's where I lived.
And I remember the TV dying. I was watching it when it happened, and the Flintstones were on, and the picture started getting smaller, and then it got a little smaller, and then it got a little smaller, and then pretty soon it was just a little white dot, and then it was gone. And I was really confused. I was like, "Why don't I get to watch the Flintstones anymore?" And my mom was like, "Looks like the TV died."
Oh wow, I love that as an image. I need to put that in a video. That's pretty great.
You better credit me.
I always credit you.
Okay.
So tell us about your imaginary friends. Do you still remember them?
I remember a few of them. I had an imaginary friend who was an astronaut. And then she was an astronaut lady. And then I had another imaginary friend who was also a lady. I don't remember their names or anything. And I had an imaginary friend who was like a sentient car that I think was based on Speed Buggy. Do you guys remember that cartoon, Speed Buggy? It was one of the Scooby-Doo knockoffs where there was like a talking car that helped a bunch of scrappy teenagers solve mysteries.
Oh my God.
Scrappy-Doo?
Yeah. It was a Scrappy-Doo of cars, really.
No, I don't remember.
But that's pretty much all I recall of that. I don't know.
Did you ever watch Land of the Lost?
I loved Land of the Lost.
I did, but I didn't really stick with me, so it wasn't something that I paid a whole lot of attention to until like years later. When it was
so the reptilians and in the pyramids monkeying with crystals really didn't resonate with you, huh?
No, I didn't have there was no religion in my upbringing, so I didn't have a whole lot of exposure to religious symbols until later on.
I wouldn't consider.
I love how the reptilians fall under that.
Well, they are. The Sleestack are reptilian. They're lizard people. What else could I? No, I didn't know that then either. I mean, I just realized that.
Yeah. So I didn't have I guess it's hard to really put my finger on anything that really impressed me. Symbols that were impressed upon me as a kid. Maybe Burger King crowns. I really liked having Burger King crowns every once in a while. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question, though. I should think about that some more and see.
So you're an Oregon native.
I am an Oregon native.
And so immediately, because I live here, and to me, everything is about the outdoors here. So
it is. You
must have had a relationship with nature.
Oh yeah. In fact, my dad is a huge outdoorsman, and so we were constantly hiking and camping, and exploring different parts of Oregon. Oddly enough, we never ventured a whole lot into Washington or California, so I never got exposed a lot to the nature in those states. But in Oregon, we were everywhere in the Cascades. We went backpacking and camping and hiking and canoeing and all kinds of stuff. Cross country skiing was really big.
Yeah.
So, and then my dad is a really avid bird watcher. So there was a lot of exposure to nature and birds and animals. I don't know that I didn't really take after him with that. I'm pretty good at identifying some birds, but maybe more than average, but maybe about 5% more than average. But it also involved lots of stargazing and there was a lot of nature in my youth.
Yeah, it is really, for people that don't know the West, it's really nature oriented. And it is up through all of it, Mm-hmm. So, and that plays a big part in how these symbols develop in our unconscious.
For sure. And it's actually something that even if you live in a city out here in Oregon, you're probably an outdoorsy type person, at least a little bit.
Yeah. The bigger Seattle and Portland, especially, they're just they're enveloped by nature here. So it doesn't even feel like it's like a metropolis springs out of the forest. So it's just wholly different from the East. What about religion? Were you brought up religious at all?
No, I was brought up, we didn't talk about it. There was no religion, like we didn't go to church. When I was a little older, we started going to Unitarian church, but it was pretty much symbol free. I do remember I became a Boy Scout at some point, and one of the merit badges was like a church merit badge where it was like you have to do all these church things in order to get the badge. And I went to my dad and I was like, Dad, what do I do? What's all this? Like, I don't understand all these questions. And so we got like this Unitarian Universalist workbook, which was still just like, it was so vague, right? There's no real dogma going on there. And my mom likes to tell this story about one time when she sent me to a neighbor's house for babysitting, and I came back and said, and I was like, Mom, there's something I really liked being over there. You know, they had like Star Wars on Laserdisc, but they had this scary picture on the wall of this really sad guy with a bird's nest on his head, and he was bleeding.
Oh my God.
My mom was like, what is he talking about? And it was one of those pictures of Jesus with the crown of thorns. I had never been exposed to that before. I had no idea what was going on. I was like, why does that even exist? So I think probably the closest, like, you know, we had Christmas and Christmas songs. So we sang about all this stuff, but I never paid any attention to what it meant. So I didn't really start to get into religion until probably junior high or later, when I, you know, discovered Wicca, and you know how that goes.
So give us a little like an edited version of how you went from like kind of the Unitarian. Thank you for the Unitarians. That space is always available to rent out and use, and I love them. How you go from that from Wicca to where you are now, which is I can see from Wicca to where you are now.
Yeah. Ooh, that's you know, that's a lot of years to sort of pack into an hour-long interview, but so I discovered Wicca. Okay, all right. So I discovered Wicca just in a bookstore. Like, it was a bookstore probably in like Bandon, Oregon, where I got some book on Wicca and maybe a tarot deck, and I was just sort of playing around with it and reading it and just being sort of fascinated. And that interest sort of grew, and I branched out into other alternative religions. And when I was in high school, sort of late. Oh, probably 80s first, you know, in the 80s and then into the 90s. But in the 90s, when I was in high school, I got training in like that neo-shamanic stuff. You know, was it Michael Harper and his The Way of the Shamans thing? He had like students who would go around and teach you these trance techniques and weird neo-shamanic healing things. And I learned that. And then in college, I got into like Discordianism and probably chaos magic. I don't remember. Everybody gets into chaos magic at some point. I don't remember when mine was. And then from there, I mean, it just kept getting, you know, I just kept doing more study, and I got into like ceremonial magic and Freemasonry, kind of right around the same time.
You're one of the big scary Freemasons.
I am a big scary Freemason. Yeah, we totally hang out with the lizard people all the time and just sort of talk about how good controlling the world is going. It's awesome. You know, except for the part where they like peel their faces off it and eat mice.
Surveillance. If you're to have a beer with Erik, there's always prying eyes around. They're the Masons looking in.
Did we didn't run into any Masons, did we? I don't remember doing that.
Wait, they were from my end.
They were the ones with the secret handshakes in the back.
Yeah.
Oh wait, wasn't that person who served you beer? Like,
yeah, I had to like keep going into the bathrooms to like change out the tapes and the cameras and stuff. It was.
So this is actually something to ruminate on for a minute. Is where you are now, and so obviously, and how your efforts in Masonry are trying to reshape the local lodge here, your lodge, and then how you're dabbling with all this old stuff, Agrippa and Picatrix and all that.
Yeah, I would say it's more than dabbling. It's a pretty big, you know, I mean, I still do, you know, I'd say that ceremonial magic is probably the closest thing I have to a religious practice. So there's a lot of that going on. I think you might be able to see part of my altar in the background. I know my camera's super crappy,
but the people here cannot see it. So
are you Scottish?
I know you guys are all missing out.
Are you Scottish?
Internet.
Are you Scottish Rite or York?
Blue Lodge.
Both.
Yeah. So I'm a pretty active Mason in Oregon, and I've done a lot of Mason stuff too. But
I'm enjoying your
building shit kind of Mason stuff, or
apron
Mason stuff.
Aprons, not bricks.
Not bricks.
Yeah.
So, would you like to disclaim any evil magic that's allegedly happening by the Masons in your lives?
You take full credit for everyone.
I have never seen Masons do evil things to other people. They mostly just do it to themselves. There's a lot of infighting in Freemasonry.
Yes,
but
of course. Humans.
We spend so much time squabbling. We don't really have time to control the world. So that's why everything's such a mess.
I can believe that. I was more interested. I wanted to ask also, are you one of the few magicians in your lodge, or everybody, or is it?
My lodge is kind of an exception in that it has attracted a lot of really esoteric and philosophical minded people. So I actually don't know how many of them. Excuse me. I don't know how many of them have an active practice, but it's more than a handful.
Well,
it's
good.
Probably, my lodge has probably like 40 some people in it, and I would guess maybe 10 to 15 of them have some sort of active practice. We've got overlaps with other, local occult and esoteric communities, and so that my lodge is an outlier in that sense. Most lodges have zero practicing.
Right, I can't imagine my local one having anyone who even knows how to spell magic. So.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, sometimes you get really surprised. Sometimes you'll go into a lodge and it'll seem like just a bunch of old guys eating spaghetti, and then one of them will be like, "Oh yeah, I knew Aleister Crowley back in the day." Oh, something, you'll be like, "What? What's going on?" So yeah, it's really one of the things about Freemasonry is it teaches occultists to dress like normal people. Unlike the OTO, which teaches occultists to dress like Hot Topic employees.
Yes. Oh man, the garb in the world.
Does it teach them, or does it just attract those types? It's up for grabs.
It totally teaches them. Okay. It totally teaches them. Yeah, I'm pretty sure in order to get your third degree in the OTO, you have to wear a black T-shirt and black leather pants.
Yes.
Man, Jim Morrison would have got in easy.
Oh, absolutely. He might have been. Who knows?
The Lizard King.
Absolutely.
He wasn't allowed to, I'm sure.
Okay, so right here, I want to, before we leave the past behind, I'm curious about any standout dreams from your childhood that you may still have recall of. You may still recall.
Standout dreams from my childhood. I don't know if this was a dream, but when we moved into the house that my parents still have in Roseburg, I was 5 years old, and when we moved in, my parents got us 2 kittens, one of which didn't live very long, died pretty young, and I used to feel like that cat was hanging out as a ghost. I used to have dreams or experience of that cat walking on the bed, and I'd be like, "Oh, the cat's in here," but the cat wasn't. There was no cat in there. It was just like a feeling of a cat. And I'm not sure if that was a dream or not. Ooh, I just thought of another one. Flying dreams.
Ooh.
Which I think are pretty common. But I had a flying dream, and this wasn't like outside flying. This is like in the house flying, where I was flying down the hallway, or I was like bumping my head on the ceiling and floating down the hallway. And this dream was so vivid that like a couple days later, I asked my parents about it. I was like, "Do you guys remember like a couple days ago I was like flying in the hallway?" And they were like, "Eric, that didn't happen. That was a dream." And I'm like, no, it was real. So I think those probably are the two. They stand out because to me, they were too real. You know, there were the sort of dreams where you're like, this is totally real.
Yes.
I mean, maybe instead of dreaming that I was flying down the hallway, I was astrally projecting myself down the hallway. That was totally not me.
That's the ghost of a dog.
It's our co-host.
Lucian.
So I would say that, yeah, those are probably the two instances that really stand out the most. I don't really think about back then very often, so if another one pops into my mind later on, I'll let you guys know.
Were you okay? So on that note, since you brought that up to your mother, have you received feedback that you sleepwalk or sleep talk?
No, but I do snore.
Okay, that seems pretty normal.
Yeah. But I've never sleepwalked, and nobody's ever told me that I've sleep talked. So no.
Okay. Well, I like the animal. So we're getting a lot of this animal stuff recently. This is great. So and I guess just for clarity's sake, this might have been like one of those little moments. I usually listen, and I was listening, but I don't remember hearing you say that the second cat actually disappeared.
Oh, one cat died and one cat
Okay, that's
lived.
what happened. Okay.
Yeah.
Just to get that straight. So after it died, that's when you had that experience.
That's my recollection. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I'm compiling a lot. I'm really moving towards the animal stuff recently. That's interesting. Very. So are you RH negative by chance?
I try not to be negative ever. I try to maintain a very positive attitude, but I have no idea. I don't know what my blood type is.
Dude, you don't know.
I try not to bleed.
What if it's an emergency?
Nobody knows their blood type.
I try not. Yeah, I try not to have emergencies.
But even when you go to get a blood test, they won't even tell you what your blood type anymore.
Are you serious, Jerry?
Yeah, I asked the last 2 times I had a test.
What the hell? I don't understand why that would be.
It's
because Jerry's type Z. He's a Vulcan.
Oh, we know Jerry is definitely of non-human origin.
I'm a time traveler from the future.
I only know mine because my mom always told me to, remember your universal donor. That was the only way. So I understand. I'm definitely not looking down your long nose at you why you wouldn't know your blood type. So on this note, have you at any time in your life played around with psychotropic stuff and that gave you, that broke the glass house around you of consciousness, how you perceive the world?
Allegedly.
Yes, allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly I have, for sure.
For legal reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I've experimented with stuff like that.
And was anything significant? Did you, was anything actually mind expansive? Did your life change in your perception of reality?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's happened to me numerous times from psychotropic, allegedly from psychotropic experiences, but also just from like ritual work. Like both of those have led to that sort of experience.
Yes, and that's another thing here. You're a magician, and I can also say amen to that, because doing some of these rituals really does lift the veil if you're doing it appropriately. Do you have any experience to share with any alleged psychotropic?
Sure. Here's one story that may or may not be true.
Teach us how to trip, Eric. Teach us how to trip.
So it was a very long night that stretched on into the morning, and I had been taking a substance that I continued to take throughout the night, maybe to a little bit of an unwise amount. And by the time morning rolled around, it was I was with a group of people, a group of really close friends, and we were just pretty much run ragged. And we had gone back to a friend's house, which is a few blocks away from my place. And he had this huge oak tree in his yard. And we all just sort of like laid down on the ground under the oak tree, probably in piles of dog shit. He had a humongous dog, and I don't think any of us looked that carefully. But I remember just sort of staring up at the tree and kind of drifting off and entering into, I don't know if I fell asleep or if I just entered into some kind of weird trance. And I had this experience of this vast and terrifying void, this nothingness that was just forever and huge and scary. And there was so much nothing there that that's not the right way to describe it. It was a void. And I remember sort of having this feeling of like, oh God, I have to choose to come back from this. Like, I have to choose to come back knowing that this is something that exists. And I had this the sort of epiphany that made me realize that I had to sort of like create my own path forward, that there wasn't nothing was going to hold my hand, basically. And then sort of turning around and coming out of that and just having this like, it was very bleak. It was a really bleak existential experience where when I came out of it, I was like, holy crap, what was that? And what did that mean? And that actually took me a few years to really kind of work through and come to terms with. And then other times, I found that if you have better reality altering experiences, if you go into it with something like that in mind. So for instance,
yes, I agree.
Like psychotropics mixed with like meditation or ritual work, or my favorite is binaural beats, or even just like nature walks, where like walking meditation sort of thing. And those have all sort of produced like nothing so reality shattering, but still very meaningful experiences that maybe don't have there's nothing as profound to share from those, but yeah, like that it's happened numerous times.
Yeah, that's always the direction that's the direction I lean towards when I ask these questions too, because I realize there's always been a party element to these things in modern culture, and I certainly have I found my way through that avenue, I guess, inadvertently.
It sounds like you found out that set and setting were important early, which is a good thing.
Yes, absolutely. Well, yeah. You're at a party and you do something like that, and then all of a sudden the world is not the world. I'm sorry, there's no more ha-has for me.
I heard Dark Side of the Moon for the first time like that, in that state, like, where am I? And then it just like blasted.
Oh my God, I love that early Pink Floyd. Yes. I love this experience of the void in making the choice. That seems very that seems right on for me in my experience with a lot of things, especially in lucid dreaming. So let's move on into that. Let's move into how you experience in general dreams. So and I'm just talking about the baseline of how you dream. So color, sounds, not the standout stuff, which we want to get to. And I know you've brought some stuff to talk about as well.
I mean, I think that I pretty much always dream in color. At least I remember them in color. I definitely hear things in my dreams. I don't know if I've ever smelled things in my dreams. Not that I can recall anyhow. But yeah, I mean, I guess I dream a lot, so I keep I don't do it as religiously as I should, but I keep a dream journal from time to time. And I know just from talking to other people that I seem to recall my dreams way more often than a lot of folks. In fact, there have been people where I've been like, hey, I had this dream last night, and they'd be like, how do you remember this all the time? I never remember dreams. So yes, I dream. They are frequent and colorful, not like overly colorful, but normal colorful.
Do you experience any do you have, so okay, that's the normal scape. Do you have you had black and white dreams or like sepia tone dreams?
I don't know. If I have, they didn't stick out to me as that way. I've had dreams that weren't. Yeah, I don't think so. I think I think my dreams are pretty much in color. I remember as a kid reading some article about that was stating that like most people dream in black and white, and thinking to myself like, that's weird. I don't feel like I dream in black and white. And I don't know that I ever have. I'm not really in my memory when I recall the dreams, they're never in black and white. So I don't know what that means.
What about the quality of sound? Is it the only way I can make this classification is like sometimes I feel like it's all in my like head, like virtual reality in a theater, like an IMAX or something, where it's just surround sound and intense, and then there's other times where it's just more muted and not that intense.
That's a good question. I honestly I don't think that I've paid. I don't know that I have enough recall of sound quality as much as like sound content. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly how I experience sound in dreams. I should probably pay more attention to that. I don't know.
And then what about what's the quality of sensate stuff with touch, of tactile stuff?
Touch always seems to be more of an impression than an actual feeling, so like I know that touch is happening, but I think usually when that happens it sort of stands out because I don't always have like a touch experience in my dreams. But when it happens, I guess it always sort of feels like the sort of thing that I don't think twice about. Like it's always like, yes, there's touch, but I haven't looked at it very analytically.
Yeah. And that's what I get at is like just the stuff that stands out is really what's more important in the end. But I do like to mull through and see where these other layers are falling.
Those are interesting questions because now I want to pay more attention to that kind of stuff when I'm dreaming. So if, I'll check in with me in a few months and maybe I'll have more input on those. Yeah.
Jerry and I have an idea going forward about stuff like that, about follow-ups.
Like giving people a shopping list, like do these dream things and report back.
Maybe not quite like that, however, but we have an idea mulling around.
We have designs.
So, yes, we do have designs.
Alert the lizard people.
Oh no. You and your Freemasonry.
It's too late for them, sorry.
So and then okay, so before we get into some of the stuff, the content you've brought, and this is great because you actually did an exercise I was going to do with you. I wasn't able to though. How do you experience reoccurring places or themes or reoccurring characters?
Absolutely. Yes. I have, I think primarily recurring places. And there's probably a handful of them that I've been in. They're almost always buildings, and they're interesting because they'll seem familiar to me every time I'm in them in a dream. And there's always some part of them that is kind of like stretching off into the infinite and unknown, right? Does that make sense? Well, yes. Here's an example. I have this one.
Examples are good. Thank you.
Okay. So I have this one dream house, I guess, that I have been in many, many times. And it's kind of like a shabby old Victorian mansion. And I always am like in this sort of atrium room on the ground floor. And I mean, this place is like falling apart. The paint is peeling and there's cobwebs everywhere.
I'm feeling this.
And and so in this room there's sort of like a grand staircase that goes up, but it goes way up, like there's floors and floors and floors above me, and it's above me that it sort of drifts off into the unknown. So like in the dream I'll always have this feeling like I can go off on this side and there's a sunroom, I can go off on this side and there's a kitchen, I can go upstairs and like there's like a library or some places that I know, but like if you go to the third floor or the fourth floor or anything above that, it's always just super mysterious. And I remember in the dreams I'm always like, I wonder what's up there, but there's always something going on that I have to dream about or interact with in the dream world that keeps me in the areas that are known. And so, but I mean, it's strange. Like you can look, I've had dreams where you look up and maybe like somewhere way off in the distance, there's some sort of like glass dome at the ceiling, but I never go up there. I don't know what's up there. It's just a mystery.
So I want to drill down on this for a minute.
The firmament.
Yeah, I know,
yeah,
right? It's totally like a description of it.
Yeah.
So, did you grow up in a Victorian house? Do you have any connection to that?
No, absolutely not. Not except maybe from like some TV show or something like The Addams Family, or who knows. But like I grew up in like very normal ranch style, small town Oregon houses that were, the house that I probably spent the most of my years in Roseburg, where I grew up, was built in like 1980.
So that's what is that makes it more significant, because like me, I have this whole Victorian past, and so it's not surprising that my dreams are filled with that kind of feel.
Oh, so your dreams aren't filled with ranch style homes?
No, darling, no.
Dang.
So I find that very significant, because there's a certain it's the Victorian house in particular, all the styles within that are a certain archetype, and I associate them a lot with maybe Pluto and because part of it is round rooms, gargoyles, green men and the carvings and all dark woodwork. There's a feel that's Plutonian in it, and even like 12th house. And so that's what's interesting, is that you were not, this is not some symbol that came to you as a child because you lived in one of these.
Right. I do have another dream house.
Ooh, tell.
This one is way more normal. And it's kind of like I almost never can remember what the front part of the house is like. It's kind of just plain. Like maybe like an old farmhouse out in Eastern Oregon or something like that. But the weird thing about it is, so this house is always on a lake, and the back of the house, like you go out to where like the garage would be, and it just stretches off down this long corridor, again, sort of off into infinity. Like I never get to the end of it. And off of it are like these just very boxy, ordinary rooms, that sometimes they'll be like sunlit, and sometimes it'll be like dormitories from like a summer camp style thing or something, and sometimes there'll be like garages with like old vehicles in them or something. But this one is all on the ground floor, right? It's just this long hallway that goes off, and sometimes I'm on the outside of this house and I'll look at it and be like, oh, that's my dream house. Or not dream houses as in I want to live there, because it's not a very,
I understand.
But I'll recognize it, and it's dark green on the outside until you get to the front part, when it's usually more freshly painted. But it's really strange. It's just like, it just goes on, and there's always people in there that I interact with. Like that place is usually pretty well stocked with people.
And so that place is stocked with people, and the other one that's Victorian is not?
It'll maybe sometimes have one person in it or two people in it, but not.
What are you usually doing in that one?
I honestly can't recall. That's a good question. It's one of those dreams where they tend to be these dreams where there's like a lot of conversation, or a lot of, I feel really confused in them. And I don't know if I have any of those written down, or any that I can really recall off the top of my head. I just know that the location pops up over and over again with both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I had a more specific dream to recall out of those, but the locations themselves are always really interesting to me the next day. Like that's always the most exciting part. I'm like, oh, I was in that dream house again. What the hell
Yes.
was I doing there?
Yes. Yeah, I find those myself, the reoccurring spaces, extremely significant. And then I try to parse out what really the particulars, because it's like, this is a place I go to.
Yeah.
This is, even though it's ever shifting.
Right.
Have you experienced people that you knew in this waking life that have passed, or animals that have passed besides that cat, in dreams?
There's another cat.
Oh, okay. Well, I know
Yeah.
you're a cat person. You have Kubla Khan there with you.
I do have Kubla. I don't know where he is right now, but he'll probably show up later. Yeah. So I actually, the cat that probably the only cat that I've had for the cat's entire life was this cat named Tarzan. He was a wonderful cat, like possibly the best cat in the world. Very friendly, very, we went through lots of misadventures together. And I had a dream about him just recently. And it was really strange. Like in the dream, oops, excuse me, I don't remember where the heck I was. It was some sunny, really pleasant place. And there was a cat there that looked nothing like Tarzan, but I knew it was Tarzan. And all he wanted to do was just sort of hang out. And it felt like kind of a message of like, everything's groovy. I'm cool. It was like just a happy Tarzan moment.
So when you encountered him in the dreamscape, you were aware that he'd actually passed in your waking life, or was it just a
Yeah, I think I was aware that he had passed. I was like, "Oh, hey Tarzan, what do you, how are you here?" That sort of thing. Yeah, but we just really hung out for a little while. It was a dream where very little happened except that I petted a cat.
And that was recent, correct?
That was very recent. That was within the last couple months.
And how long has he been dead?
I think he died in 2012.
Oh, interesting. Very.
Yeah.
I love that though. All those years have passed, and then he pops up recently. That's great.
Yeah. Well, the weird thing was that he didn't look like him in the dream, right? He was a different color, and he had stripes. Like Tarzan, the original Tarzan, real Tarzan, was a black cat, and the dream cat was like tawny and light colored. But
it was still Tarzan.
It was absolutely, yeah, it was totally Tarzan. I mean, maybe it's Tarzan's new life. Maybe he reincarnated as another cat.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why it's significant.
You just reminded me of Little Shop of Horrors. Totally Tarzan. Like Suddenly Seymour.
I wish people could see you sometimes, Jerry.
I want somebody who's watching our YouTube channel right now to make me a Totally Tarzan theme song.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Let's get on that, people.
I'm sure Felix would do it.
Come on, Internet.
We always have such a modest little, I don't even look because I get distracted too easily and my computer hates it.
Well, I don't even know how to look.
So, okay. And then some more P's and Q's. Oh, there's the co-host.
Hey, co-host.
Some more P's and Q's before we get into some dreams that you've brought to share.
Okay.
What about, this is kind of a two-part thing, and we might revisit it later, but in context to right now and what we're talking about, have you experienced deja vus that may be tied into dreams that you could actually say, oh, I dreamed this?
I've had that feeling many, many times. I've never been able to confirm. It's never been a dream that I've written down, right? Like that would be great if I'd written down a dream where I was like, I dreamt that this and this and this happened, and then it did. Like that has never happened to me. But I've had the feeling many times.
So describe, just give an example. Like, so you're walking in a room, you have the deja vu, and you're like, you actually associate it with a dream.
It's very seldom that it's of any significance. It'll usually be the sort of situation where I'm having a conversation with somebody, where we meet somebody new, and all of a sudden I'll be like, oh, I feel like I dreamt that I had this exact conversation.
Okay.
So I don't really have, again, it's one of those things that I didn't, I thought it was really curious at the time, but I probably didn't write it down or record it well enough to bring you a specific example of that, unfortunately.
Yeah, but it's just still tying it to the fact that you have a memory of thinking that that you're experiencing that seems familiar, that is a deja vu, is something you actually remember or think you remember dreaming. And that's all the tie-in I'm trying to make. I don't care about documentation.
I have had that experience.
What about, okay, so this is, and I'm always struggling to find the right words for this. Of course, I like the witchier words like prophetic. But dreams that have come true, and no matter how insignificant it seems, just, and so that you can see how this kind of ties into deja vu also. But have you dreamt anything that came to pass?
No, maybe not that I am aware of at the moment. I feel like if that did happen,
you would not. You would have totally this. Like last week, Heidi was just, you don't want Heidi dreaming about you, because she said they're always intense and they're always true. But she brought, she was able to bring that right up. Yeah, that's what I wanted to get. I wanted to get all that kind of background context. So let's talk modern dreams, what you're dreaming about right now. And I think we should get right into the little situation you just did.
Oh yeah. So I decided that I was going to do some dream magic, and I used the Greek magical papyri, and it took me a little while to pull it all together. There's a lot of, actually, I took a lot of notes. Let me see. I went through Stephen Skinner's book, which is called The Techniques of the Greek Magical Papyri.
Yes, and I think it's
a great book. I
have it's essential.
Oh yeah.
It's not an instruction book.
It's absolutely essential, and he catalogs. Yeah, well, it's a catalog, right? So he breaks. So you can't really it's really hard to find what you're looking for if you're just reading through the magical papyri. So he basically breaks all the spells down into categories, and he's like, if you're looking for this kind of spell, these are the typical elements, and go here, and then he'll have this chart, and in the chart it'll have where it is in the papyri, like the gods that are involved, like the kind of thing that it's trying to do, and specifically, and like all that kind of stuff. So I went through there, and there are probably like maybe a dozen or so rituals in the Greek magical papyri that are intended to request what they call request dream oracles. So I looked for the easiest ones, because some of them are really complicated, and
yes,
I love
there's
magic.
Like some cat blood in one of them or something. It's like
I wasn't gonna like sacrifice any animals. I didn't want to like hunt down rare ingredients and try to make like weird magic inks or anything like that. I wanted to do something really simple, and I still took some liberties. Like the ancient Egyptians didn't have aluminum, so they used tin foil to do stuff, and I was like, to hell with that. I've got so much aluminum foil, I'm just going to use aluminum foil. They'd probably be super excited about aluminum if they had it. So I went through and I found a number of them. And the ones that I was looking at were actually pretty interesting. Some of them involved using an oil lamp and speaking to it. And you would speak to the oil lamp and be like, I have a yes or no question. If it's a yes, make me dream about this thing. And if it's a no, make me dream about this thing, which would be cool. I have not experimented with that yet.
But we have a friend that has and does and had great experiences.
Make me dream about this thing. With that,
I'm gonna.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've been talking to him about this as I went through it too, because
he's really a good source.
Incredible.
Yeah,
he's an incredible resource for this stuff.
Yeah,
and in fact, he was the one who was like, "No, get tin." I'm like, "I'm not doing it. I'm using aluminum." He probably slept horribly that night.
Theophilus is his name.
Yeah. So there were so some of them involved. Some of the really interesting ones that I also really want to try involved drawing an image of a Besa or Bes, who's one of the it's an Egyptian god that he's like an ugly little dwarf that's like facing the camera instead of turned sideways. So if you've seen a picture of him, it'd probably stand out. But you basically draw a picture of him in one of your hands, and you surround it with all this magic words, and then you wrap your hand with what they call a black cloth of Isis, and you go to sleep. I didn't try that one because I have no idea what the black cloth of Isis is, and that's kind of, I'm gonna have to figure that out. So the one that I did involved writing barbarous names and god names on a piece of foil, and then incensing it with a prayer, and then almost directly after it, well, actually directly after it, you go to sleep. In the spell, it's like, don't talk to anybody, go directly to bed. I was like, all right, I can do that.
Can I insert this? Jerry,
Yeah.
Jerry can post a photo of your tinfoil, right? Didn't you post that to Steam it or somewhere?
Yeah.
I actually can show video. I mean, if you want to do a share screen, I can show it. I've got that working, by the way.
Sure. Hold on. Let me.
Because I think it helps for people to see it.
No, I agree.
And it's interesting, and it's accessible. It's the thing about this one you did perform.
Yeah, and the foil, like I destroyed it after I used it, but do you want me to send you the link, Jerry? I'll just send you the link.
Sure. No, I can't share it. You have to do it.
You can't share the link in our chat? I
can share the link. I was going to show. I can't share the screen to show the picture. It's okay. Just send me the link. Never mind. Send me the link.
Okay. I'm sending you a link. Right. Zoom chat. Okay. So yeah, and the foil itself doesn't include anything. You know, it would be the same every time. You'd prepare it the same every time. But the thing is, you prepare it, you stick it under your pillow, and you go directly to sleep. So I decided I've been trying to figure out like different ways of changing my income or generating more income or something like that. So I put that into the prayer. I went to sleep. And then at some point in the night, Kubla Khan, my cat, woke me up. And it wasn't just like he jumped on me and woke me up. When I woke up, he had his paw on my face. He was sitting there staring at me, pawing me in the face.
Oh wow!
And I was like, what's going on? And then I was like, oh my God, I've been dreaming. And so I immediately got out my journal. I started writing down all my dreams, and I had 4 specific dreams. And the crazy thing was, it was a very short amount of time. Like I had gone to bed probably between like 10:30 and 11, and Kubla woke me up at like 1:30 in the morning. So in that span of time, I had like 4 very specific dream images that kind of stuck out. And I still haven't totally figured out how they tie into my question, which totally makes me think of like all the stories of, like the Oracle of Delphi, who always gave like super vague answers and stuff.
Yeah.
So it really seems like at the same time, like I got these dream oracles or these oracular dreams that were hazy but maybe helpful. Like I'm not going to share the first one.
Okay, but I'll share what you
some of them. Okay, the first one is kind of Freudianly uncomfortable, and I have to unpack it a little bit still.
Ooh, those are my favorite, but okay.
Yeah,
over a beer credit.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so the second one, which I think had the clearest meaning. I was in a space that was super brightly lit and kind of reminded me of a, I don't know, like a lawyer's reception area in a sci-fi film or something like that. Like it was all white and brightly lit. There was a man in a suit standing behind like a receptionist desk, and the impression I got from him is that he was very uncomfortable and didn't have a lot of confidence in himself. And in front of him, he had a collection of objects in a row. It's like 4 or 5 of them, or maybe even more. And they're all sort of brightly colored, like rainbow colored orbs that were, they weren't like smooth orbs. They looked like puzzle orbs or something. The impression I got from him was that he knew what he was doing, but didn't have any confidence in himself. And he didn't say anything that gave you that impression. That was just sort of the feeling I got. But behind him, there was like one of those frosted shower sliding door things, which was also brightly colored. And my attention was immediately drawn to that, and it was closed. And I was like, oh, there's some sort of influencer hiding in that shower closet. So that was just sort of a dream vignette or something that I had. It was very short. The next dream I had was kind of scary. I was running away from something, and in my dream I was like, oh, I'm being chased by an evil wizard. And I got to this door, and in front of the door were these two people, and they were both kind of like, I don't know, pudgy janitor types. And I was like, what's going on? What's going on? And they're like, we are. And they told me that they were spirits that had been summoned to protect me, that I should go behind them and go through the door, and that they would die saving my life. And I was like, okay, cool. And I did it. Yeah. And then the fourth one was possibly the weirdest. And all I remember from this one is I was looking at, it was a dark, dark room. And I was kind of looking through into like a window that was sort of lit like it was dawn or sundown. It was just the light coming through, like this amber light. And sitting in the window in profile was this naked pregnant woman. But the light was sort of like coming through her pregnant stomach, so I could see the baby in there. And there was this other woman who was like worshiping her or kneeling in front of her, like worshiping the stomach. And the baby's hands were like suddenly started coming out of the stomach, and they like grabbed the other woman's head and pulled her into the stomach.
I'm speechless over that.
Yeah, I don't know what that one means at all.
So in that one, though, let's look at that one for a minute. So in that one, what was the feeling you were having as you were witnessing this?
I would say it was a feeling of awe, kind of maybe shock, like sort of like what is going on? Because it was very surreal. It was like, it was like body dysmorphia sort of stuff, and weird. There was something weird going on where I didn't feel like I was supposed to be there necessarily. I was watching something very private that was happening between two people that maybe I shouldn't have been seeing.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, and then with the first one that you shared with the one in the suit and there seems to be, for me, there's a small theme in context to the question in your petition.
Okay.
That are you not seeing that? Like, is there? Not that the show's not about dream analysis, because that would be a personal thing. But I do want to just maybe try and drill in on it a little bit. So like the person in the suit, and you said they seemed not, wasn't there like an apprehension or something? What was going on with the feeling of that one?
My feeling of him was that he lacked confidence.
Yeah.
He was just really unsure of what he was doing.
But he's in a suit, and so we have that as a symbol right there, right? Professional. Right.
So he was, and he was supposed to know what he was doing, and maybe he did, but he didn't feel like he did.
And then the frosted door. So it's a pane of glass, but yet it's not transparent, right? And it's a color.
Yeah. And I don't remember what color it was. I want to say it was probably like a pastel blue or something. It was very, like, the whole room, there was nothing threatening in that room. It was all very like pastel colors or like rainbow colors. And most of the furniture and walls and everything were bright white, like almost like over bright white.
So I get right from that immediately, though. I get this self-consciousness about, in what your petition was about, and that you can't see past, you can't see through that glass. But there's even questioning with the suit. Like, so this seems capable, but there's this internal aspect that's somehow an impasse. And then if we move into this one with the baby, with the pregnant woman in profile, and you can see the baby in there, like an X-ray almost, correct?
Kind of. It was,
It reminded me of those goats. Remember when they were making those cloned goats in those bags and you could see through them?
Oh, God, yeah. That was creepy.
Well, that's what it reminded me of. It was
a creepy dream.
but if you look at it in context to what your petition was, so you can see that, so we got the pregnant woman who is she's pregnant with this thing that's coming forth, this thing that she is wanting to create, that is creating no matter what. And so we think about you with your petition and your question that you asked, and so you can see it, you can see through, and you can see it in there. And so it reached its hands out. Fill this in for me again.
Yeah, so there was another woman who was sort of leaning in, and the baby reached its hands out of the belly and sort of grabbed her by the head and pulled her in.
And that felt
weird.
Disturbing.
Yeah,
well, it's a disturbing image, but if you're in the moment and you go back to that moment, was the lady being pulled in afraid?
No, she was eager. And I guess I remember having a feeling like I felt like I was watching something that was private that I shouldn't be seeing, but at the same time being like really curious about what was going on. So I was kind of creeped out and curious at the same time.
And still, this is, you've petitioned the oracle, you have questions, and this is what the oracle gives you, these hardcore symbols.
Yeah.
And so in a way, it seems to me like you know what you should do, and it's almost, it's like a canned, I'm not meaning this to be canned, but it seems like you know what you should do, you know the direction you want to go in, you want to work less, make more, all that, and yet you're not taking the steps. You can see you don't have enough confidence or oomph to do it. And eventually you could just get pulled in, like inadvertently, or you could get pulled into something you don't want to do.
I think that's a good interpretation. I like that. I mean, I'm still thinking about it, but I think the way you're looking at it is really good, and that will definitely that I think that has a lot of value to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of deconstructing the symbols, because that's the language we're speaking. And I always find these more severe symbols are the ones to pay attention to. That's why they are sticking out. That's why they are, sometimes scary or just, extremely visceral.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, thank you. That was helpful. I'm gonna take that into.
It seems like
that into consideration.
There's also another thing, like so the baby, a pregnant woman and the baby inside can be a symbol for a project, right? And so it could possibly be something that's a project that can take you to where you want to go, and that you're not involved in yet because you were the observer here.
Right.
So to keep your eyes open for something that actually that is kind of there, but you're not seeing it as a possibility for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe the future will tell. Maybe it's painting out a course of action that I need to take. I guess that's something that I don't necessarily know for sure yet.
Yes. Well, that's true. So I love that you got the success though from this experiment.
I'm definitely going to try some more of this, and I'm probably going to move on to some of the more complicated dream oracle stuff. There's also a whole category of magic in the dream magic that involves sending dreams to people, which is
I was quite interested in those sections.
Yeah, I haven't tried that out yet either, but one of them involves like the one that looked easiest. You had to get the target's mom's name. So yeah, I'll work that out.
Those crazy Egyptians.
I know. But I mean, like,
if they really existed.
Jerry. It's like the Jerry Nomad moment. Jerry's got his nomad. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, like, but that also, so, using dreams in ceremonial magic is something that I've done quite a bit too. Not necessarily always on purpose, but I've had dreams sort of like inform or influence my ritual. In fact, I've never joined a magical order. I mean, I guess I've joined the Freemasons, but I wouldn't really consider them necessarily a magical order. But So most of my initiation in the magical sense has been sort of like self-initiation type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had teachers, and I was talking to one of my teachers once, and I was like, I want to do this initiation. I want to be moving away from this particular symbol set and start doing something new. And he's like, well, pay attention to your dreams. Maybe something in your dreams will help you out. And I was like, okay, whatever. And then I had this crazy dream. And in the dream, I don't remember all the details now. It's written down in one of my magical journals, which somebody will possibly get access to after I die. But some of the things that I do remember is that there was like some sort of king who was a dwarf, and there was like a castle, and there was like this siege going on. And I remember telling my teacher about the dream. He's like, that's your self-initiation. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, take whatever happened in there and turn it into a ritual. I was like, all right. And I did. And then other times I've had, if I've had like workings that have lasted more than a day, I've had like dreams that have changed or influenced like symbols or elements that I've used in my ritual.
Yes. Yeah. I find that's a common experience.
And that tends to be potent, and sometimes, much more like emotionally charged than it would otherwise be, which I think is pretty cool.
Have you, in that vein,
mm-hmm.
and that's usually a question we ask here is, do you get downloads? And so like when you're learning something or when you're doing something, and
mm-hmm.
ritual certainly applies, especially these long rituals that, where there's fasting involved and all this. Have you received what seemed like clear downloads? You just kind of said yes to that, but do you have do you have examples to share?
I don't know that. I mean, I guess the thing is with dreams, it never seems incredibly clear. I don't know. I think that I've had dreams that have been maybe more meaningful than I realized at the time. I'm thinking in particular of a dream that I remember very clearly from when my marriage was failing. And this is a long time ago. And if my ex-wife is watching this, I'm not going to reveal any personal information about you. but this was a long time ago, and our marriage was sort of failing. And I remember this dream. I was in this beautiful kind of like valley in like the Rocky Mountains or something. It was all grassy, it was pretty, and there were like all these cabins there, like cabins that you could like rent out and stay in. And I walked into the cabin that I had, and it was on fire on the inside. But there were like these glass walls that were keeping me away from the fire. And I remember just being like, holy crap, how do I put this fire out? I can't get to it. Which in retrospect was a totally perfect metaphor for my marriage.
Yeah, that could not be more clear.
Yeah,
that's the beauty.
But I didn't realize it at the time, right?
Yeah. Well, that's common too. Is we don't see. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there's it's like the pregnant woman. It's just so it's like something obvious in your life that you're not seeing, but once you look, it'll be transparent. So
yeah.
It's like
I'm
that.
Gonna keep looking. That's a good.
But it's obvious, and it's something right there that is somehow.
I mean, maybe it feels obvious to you, but to me, like I didn't even think of it that way. Yeah, I mean, I didn't even think about it that way until you brought it up.
What about nightmares and night terrors? So you did give us a little teaser that those happen.
I mean, I would have to say that I've never had night terrors. Or anything of that sort. I've had, and I mean, even the dreams that are uncomfortable to me or contain like frightening elements to me, I don't know that I ever really consider them nightmares. I don't know that, at least not since I was a kid. I'm sure when I was a kid I had nightmares, but I don't know that I really do as an adult. Like I never wake up terrified from my dreams anyhow. But yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so what about as we look at like paralysis, sleep paralysis? Because sometimes the terrors or that stuff ties into that when you first start getting out of body. And it actually is, for me, it was very scary. And I keep hearing that from a lot of people, except for Ren. Ren is just like natural. It's like out of the body and gone.
I've never had a sleep paralysis experience either.
Interesting. So with lucidity and out of body experience, it sounds to me like you have very lucid dreams though. But there is definitely a category that there's a difference between lucidity and out of body.
Yeah.
So
I would say, the way that I've heard lucid dreams explained to me, I would have to say that very few of my dreams, maybe none of them, are like 100% lucid. But I still, I think, have an awareness that I'm dreaming sometimes, or even sometimes like some influence over the dream. I don't know that I ever sort of like come to full awareness or full consciousness that I'm dreaming. Although I have had times like I had a flying dream recently, probably within the last year, where in the dream I was like, oh, I'm flying, I should go somewhere cool. Where I don't know that I necessarily knew I was dreaming, but I definitely like did stuff consciously in the dream. And I remembered that waking up being like, did I know I was dreaming? I don't know if I knew. I mean, I totally made decisions.
How do you not see that as lucid though, Eric? You did stuff, you decided to do stuff in the dream and did it. And in a way that is conscious.
But I guess I always have figured that lucid dreaming is more of a sense where you're in the dream and you realize it's a dream and then you make changes. Whereas I felt like in the dream, because I feel like a lot of times dreams sort of play out like movies or books where you have something unfolding that you kind of like go along with, where you're being acted upon rather than the actor. Or you're like an observer or something, or you're sort of like, you might be experiencing it all first person, but the story is already pre-written or the dream is already pre-made. And maybe that does count as a lucid dream, but I mean, I totally know that in the dream I decided to fly somewhere and I was making decisions. And when I woke up, I was like, oh, that's unusual. That doesn't usually happen to me. Right? I mean, if it does,
Well, that sounds lucid to me, but I mean, it could.
There are varying degrees of lucidity.
Yeah, of course. But when you're making choices and doing things like when your will is involved, I definitely classify that as that. But that's semantics.
And what you said about your idea of lucidity is when you realize it in your dream. You could just think of it that you just go into the dream already lucid. You already realize it. That might be why you don't recognize it, because you're already in that state. It's possible. I don't know. It's your dream.
That could be. Yeah, it is. I don't know. I guess it could be. It could count as a lucid dream. I would say maybe half lucid. Is that a thing? It's a thing.
Yeah, but this is a very you answer, Eric. You're hilarious.
I think everything's a thing.
He's never over dramatizes though. That's what's great. You under dramatize. Well. Anyway, so
under promise and over deliver. That's Eric.
He'll start out the videos with his brother with, "This is going to be a waste of your time." Stuff like that. Anyway, when those are hilarious.
That's just true.
It is true. I mean, those are a waste of your time.
You guys. So, okay, let's get into some of the gooey stuff. Let's get into the woo-woo.
Okay.
Yeah, well, so, no, just about your thoughts on...
Okay.
No, you haven't even touched woo. You haven't even, your toe's not even in, right, Jer?
Oh.
Right.
Well, we did talk about reptilians earlier. I guess that's...
we were joking. Now we're
it was a
serious
joke.
About them.
Oh,
so first of all, let's get into what do you think? Where do you think consciousness is?
What do I think consciousness is?
What is it? Where do you think it is? Let me parse this out for you. Let me parse this out. You have the experience of memories of your life that you're living, right? And that yet there's no way to make that real. I mean, you can look at photos, I suppose, and videos and stuff, but it's still detached from you now. And then you have the experience of dream. And so where you were participating in those experiences, they are now memories. You have dreams where you are participating in them, but they fall into the realm of like dreams and memories. It's all not here. And then we move on a timeline. And of course, I think it's all point to point, the circle rounded, right? But so then there's death ahead, right? As far as how we are dealing with this plane of existence, where that is also something like allegedly you have consciousness there and all the stuff there. So that's
I mean, that's a huge leap. Like, do we know that we have consciousness there? I'm not sure.
Well,
I mean,
just having been in the process of it, in the process of dying, we have the ability to be conscious, and that's a fact. And so so that's why I'm asking, where is consciousness? Because right now we're talking live here and now, but how is this why is this the focus?
I mean, I got ideas about that. I don't know that any of them are necessarily correct, but
but that we don't care about. We're not asking you to hang this on scientific method. We want your ideas.
All right. Okay. I feel like, so my first thought is that I don't believe that consciousness is an emergent property of matter. I think that consciousness precedes or super exists matter. That we perhaps all might be sharing some element of the same kind of consciousness, and that our particular spirit or mental physical construct or something is like a receiver of consciousness. I think that makes a lot more sense to me and fits better into experience that I've had. As far as why we're here, or why it's happening, or why we're experiencing this now, that's a really tough question. I guess I always want to sort of fall back on like a poorly interpreted Kabbalistic view of this. Saying poorly interpreted because I've been studying Kabbalah for like 20 years, and all I've discovered in those 20 years is I totally don't understand it. And I've continued to deepen in my not understanding of it the more I've studied, but I feel like we are maybe a fragmented bit. Like, our experience of consciousness, or the consciousness that we have or experience, is sort of like a dribbling of the cosmic or grand or like divine consciousness that has achieved a level of awareness solely for the purpose of not only perceiving but also comprehending and maybe even repairing creation and God. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, I'm following. I'm just letting it breathe. Yeah.
Okay.
So what is God?
I don't know. That's what we're here to figure out. Like, when we do figure that out, it'll be gone. We'll be done. Everything will be done. We are the moment of God's introspection.
Or a dream.
Possibly.
Or
possibly. Maybe.
It's all made
because everything is made up for sure.
Right, true. God is fake news. That's what I'm saying.
Fake news. Heck, fake news is fake news. Yeah, everything is true, even the false stuff.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
In some dimension,
so, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So how does one hang anything on the intangible, like memories and dreams, away from this waking experience? Like, how can we, I hear it every day. I hear conviction in my experience of this and my experience of that. And to me, it's all the same dribble, because if we're only ever experiencing this moment, which is kind of where we always are, even though it's ever changing, ever blooming, ever spiraling, it's your experience then is always changing. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out your ideas on how this right now, this nowness is working. I heard what you said, and I enjoyed it, but I still didn't feel like I got that out of you.
I honestly I feel like that's something I'm still trying to figure out. I feel like maybe the grand quest or the great work or whatever is to really try to figure out why we're here, what we're supposed to be doing, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, we all get so caught up in like the distractions of the rat race in everyday life that we don't really spend a whole lot of time experiencing experience. Or
right,
that's a horrible sentence.
Experiencing now, though. Yeah,
experiencing now. But I mean, even like when you really break it down, we don't even get to experience now. There is no experiencing of now. The now that's in our head, the now that our consciousness is going through, is always behind the experience of perception, right?
Yes.
Perception is always the past.
Yes.
The future is always rushing towards us, fighting to be the past. And the past is imperfectly stored in this cloud of memory that each of our souls has imperfect access to, that's filled with like haziness and misrememberings and imperfections. And I totally just lost myself there.
Well, it leads me to this aspect of a question. So if we're always in the now, so if we push ourselves into the now of our death or birth, I think they're both kind of similar. So we're in the now of our death. And then there's all the stuff that comes around, from Kubler-Ross's work to just all the people that have studied dying. And about how not the moment of death, because we don't have a lot of access to that, but the process of dying, and how people in that process are living a life review, right? Where you're dying, and the things that seemed important, throughout other periods of your life when that wasn't acute, are now, they've fallen aside, and now you're wondering about you and your journey and what's happening to you and how this is going to be, what's ahead. That nowness, put ourselves in that nowness. So is that, and then if we think of it, you laid the God word out, and of course, as someone that is not a Christian, I don't have baggage with that. So that's Sophia to me. It's a lot of different things. So the nowness of death, and then this review, right? I'm going to die. This is where I'm headed. Even if it's one of those time stand still experiences, like you're in a car accident, if you've ever been like in a traumatic experience where time literally stands still, and it's like a superhero movie, and you can make choices within that, but it's all actually happening super fast. So the nowness of death, and we're in review of our lives as we've gotten, how do we get here? Is it possible that there's a grand level of genesis here in that death birth experience, where we are all actually trapped, reviewing individually, I suppose, as cells in a body or whatever, as Erik, reviewing.
So you're asking if what I'm doing now might be the review that's actually happening on my deathbed?
Right. So maybe your consciousness is actually somewhere where you're more acutely in the moment, and these are just reverberations.
That certainly could be. I mean, again, like that's a lot of speculation, as much as I was making before, honestly. But
it's crazy talk, honestly.
And that's what we love. That's what Nox Mente is about. Night mind.
Exactly.
We are the children of the night.
I mean, so
should be called high mind.
The thing is, it makes me think of Augustine writing about his memory and his I can't. I wish I could quote Augustine. I wish that I could just pull it out of my ass, because his words are far more beautiful than anything I will ever
Augustine
say.
is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, but he has this passage where he talks about he obviously had some kind of mystical experience. Like, he had this experience of the Godhead, or this experience of like divine love, or something that was so great that it had really moved him. And afterwards he wrote about how memory was the only thing that, I mean, there's so many good and bad things come along with memory and with remembering, but without memory he would not know God, and he would not know that experience that he'd had, and that sort of, and he lays it out in this like vision of this, he calls it like this garden of memory, or this field of memory that he's like traipsing through. And every time I read it, I get this picture of like this crusty, cranky old monk like prancing through this field of wildflowers, having this sort of like him and God sort of in an old romance movie prancing towards each other, about to embrace or something like this. He has this beautiful vision of his own experience where he's like, the memory of my experience is the only thing that builds who I am, and the only thing that creates who I am. But his memory of his experience isn't just his memory of the physical world. To Augustine, there's almost no difference between his memory of his dreams and his mystical visions and his physical existence. He blends them all together and says, like, all of these experiences build who I am. It's not just your memories of the physical world that make you. It is also your visions and dreams and all of that stuff. So like right now, like the reality that I experience now, and like the experience that I'm having now, who knows what parts of that will be significant in my memory in the future. But I do know that that I've had vision and dream that have been just as important in building who I am, some of which have had like such incredible emotional impact on me that, just even talking about that brings shadows of those memories back to me. So I don't know that it matters if right now I am recounting my life on my deathbed. If so, then that means that every moment ahead of me is already laid out and has already happened. But
that doesn't necessarily mean that.
I was just going to say that it kind of implies predestination. If you're in a life review.
Sure. If I'm in a life review, then it does imply predestination. But, as Rabbi Ira Stone says, it doesn't matter. Predestination doesn't necessarily matter. You have to pretend that predestination doesn't exist so that you can make sure that you are making the best actions with the most consciousness possible in every moment.
Or trust that you'll always do the right thing, right?
I don't trust that I'll always do the right thing.
Well, I mean, according to plan. That I can. Right, as in according to plan.
That's not really what his message is. He says that it doesn't matter if predestination exists or not. You have to pretend that it doesn't so that you can
make the right decision. I understood what you said. I'm saying the opposite of that would be to not worry about it, because you'll always trust in the fact that you're making the right moves. This is what you are supposed to do.
Yeah, I don't really trust that necessarily. I've seen, I don't trust that. I will constantly strive to better myself so that I can make better decisions.
But maybe that's what you were predestined to do. Maybe that's your script. You know what I'm saying?
Still worrying about it.
See that?
The dreamer loves the dream.
Yeah.
What about, okay, so with that said, in this whole idea of for me it's all like the dreaming self, so I guess and there's no real timeline, it's not linear for
there's
me.
No real time.
And so I really truly have that sense in me and I've always had it, and I think that's probably why I'm terrible with dates and like even how old I am, all this stuff. It's like it's just so insignificant to me and doesn't play a part of my daily life, except when I have to show up for Nox Mente.
Thank you for gracing us with your presence.
So Eric, what do you think? Again, this is just us speculating, and that's the juice in the end, speculation. So what do you think happens after death? What, like, after you leave here?
Oh boy, I have no idea. I know
you
changed
don't
my
have
mind a
any
lot.
idea, but what have you ruminated on in the past?
Yeah, there's not like there's right answers.
Yeah.
Oh, I honestly, like, I've ruminated on it and thought about it, and I've been like, I don't know if that happens. I don't know. I don't know. Like, I am not convinced of anything. I believe that one thing that I believe is that our constituent parts are never destroyed. Our matter, the matter of our body might be reduced to its components, but those components continue.
Physics says that's true.
Sure. But then, like, the subtle components, like what exists of consciousness or something, might be broken down into constituent parts as well. I don't know. I think that's probably true. And redistributed in some way, or reincorporated into the divinity in some way.
What about reincarnation?
I personally find reincarnation to be a real tough pill to swallow. But at the same time, there seems to be a lot of evidence of that. And maybe there is some way to enable that, or some way to, like, I don't know.
What about it do you find hard to swallow?
He's a spitter.
Ooh, child.
Sorry. It's Discord chat boiling over into the
I know, right? Oh dear.
I guess with stuff like that, like, I just feel like, if with extraordinary claims, you have to have something. Like, what is the idea of reincarnation? Just another one of those things that's supposed to make us feel better about dying? Like, don't worry, you'll come back as like the king of something, or don't worry, you'll come back as like a cat. Like, that'd be cool. I wouldn't mind coming back as a cat. But what is, like, what purpose then does reincarnation serve, and what purpose does it serve to us as we go through this life? Like, so many people go through life just having this horrible dread of death, and, like, fighting tooth and nail to delay it and stave it off, and, like,
I would argue that's a learned thing too, a learned fear.
Yeah, it could be. Except that animals fear it as well.
It's the survival instinct, absolutely, but do they really understand death and what it is like we do?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
We barely understand it. Yeah, I have no idea. But so I guess, to me, reincarnation a lot of times just feels a little bit too much like a safety blanket, like a kind of
okay. What about,
don't worry sort of blanket?
Can I ask one more thing just while we're here?
Jerry, carry on.
To flip that, just to flip the question that Nish asked you, what would you like death to be?
Oh, I like that one, Jerry.
Oof, that's a really good question. I have actually not thought about it that hard. I suppose what I would like death to be, I would like to die, and, even if my consciousness doesn't continue forever, I would like to have a moment of just sort of, like, ultimate knowledge, and being like, oh my god, that's what's going on. And then, even if at that point I snuff out, I'm like, that's cool, all my questions just got answered. I had a moment of omniscience and was gone. That'd be enough for me.
Good answer. I think that would be boring though, if knowing everything.
Yeah, I agree.
Well,
I think there is,
but you don't have any time to be bored.
True.
You know everything, and then whoosh, you're gone. So you don't get
so it's like an epiphany moment, and then it's like an orgasm.
That's when you die, right? You have an orgasm when you die. You learn everything, and then they do the mind wipe, and you're back in the body.
Right, you're just a mess on the sheets.
Mm-hmm. Don't they call it
in someone else?
In Italian, don't they call it? Isn't there a slang term for orgasm that means, like, tiny death?
The little death.
The little death. Yeah. I think it's a beautiful way to look at
yeah.
it, actually. Mm-hmm.
And
I've always liked it.
I heard someone explain it too in an esoteric way that made sense. I don't recall the actual way it was described.
Try to recall.
I don't remember. It was something about that at the moment of orgasm, there's a certain type of energy that's released, and that's a creational energy. Maybe it's the Kundalini. Mm-hmm. I don't remember what type it was or what, you know, I think each culture also has a different viewpoint on it. But basically, when you emit this creative energy, you die a little bit because you're draining yourself and you have a finite amount of this creative energy.
Well, we know this in magic because we abstain from these things too. That's part of, like, at least in ceremonial magic and into the ancients, you don't do that. You don't release. And there's still this stuff comes into the modern world where you don't, like ball players stuff about women make legs weak and all this other stuff that goes on before something important. I wonder though. So
she's here, and I do know that, not to be crude, but in like certain multi-orgasmic situations, women get close to leaving their bodies if they can actually leave their bodies.
Oh baby, I can tell you.
Yeah,
it is. I've been shook out.
Exactly. So I mean, I know this happens. Okay. So
I wanted to actually ruminate on the reincarnation thing a bit longer. As we look through the lens of the ancients, it seemed like a lot of the ancient world was there with it, that there was an afterlife, there was a continuation into other lives. And as someone that studies these things, Erik, and is using some of these, these spells and incantations and tools, I find that an interesting disconnect with you.
I don't consider it a disconnect. I feel like, like I said, like I think that probably our consciousness breaks down and possibly into constituent parts, and then those parts probably get reused. And it could be that there are ways that fragments or pieces of consciousness continue on in new bodies or new lives. I don't think that we have any, I would be super skeptical of any claim that like the entirety of what it is that maybe the me that is currently in the podcast is not even the same me that it was at the beginning of it. I mean, consciousness itself, like there's a this makes me think of all this stuff that's very, very difficult to put into words, but sort of the intersection of like consciousness and time. So sure, maybe there is, maybe reincarnation is totally possible. What I'm saying is, I think that the popular view of reincarnation is a little bit of a safety blanket view.
Yeah, especially the New Agey aspect of it.
Yeah. Now, I really think that maybe there is something to some kind of idea of continuation of self or consciousness or whatever it is that makes us up. Like that could be totally possible. And I mean, if we're going to talk about like the ancient world, look at Egypt. Like their idea of reincarnation was super weird. They believed that our soul was actually 6 different things that existed within you, and that at your death, I'm going to get all the names wrong, but like one of them is like the Ka, and then there's the Ba, and
the Ba,
and then there's like Ringo and John and stuff like that.
Yeah. Skinner's book lays it all out.
It does. But like one part of that is like your facade, like your physical appearance and the way that you interact with the world, and that would like remain around as some sort of ghost. But there was no substance to it, right? The soul of the thing, like the other parts of the soul, weren't there. One part of it goes into the underworld and has to get tested, against the feather of Mott and possibly eaten by a giant alligator.
Yeah.
It's like a rerun.
The ghost out into the cosmos. Yeah.
Hello, alligator, reptilian.
I know. They're in control of everything.
And the alligator's a Mason.
Keck.
Wasn't that
Kick.
Apep? Was Apep the evil alligator in the underworld? I don't remember. And then there are like all these other parts that have different things to do. And so, I mean, maybe it's possible that there's some fragment, some celestial feather of the self that continues on in reincarnation. Maybe it's little, soul fragments or shards that are so tiny and insignificant that they're almost impossible to pick up most of the time. I don't know. I'm not convinced one way or the other, and I'm not ready to commit to an idea of reincarnation.
Yeah, I'm open with all of it. I think it's for me, that's the best way to be with so much anyway. It's just to, I understand the idea of it and I like the idea of it on some levels. But I have no dogma with it.
Okay.
So let's move into, this is, what is the goal of your magic right now? What are you doing? Why are you doing magic?
I am doing it to improve myself and to gain knowledge and to understand more. I think those are probably, I think gain knowledge and understand more might be the same thing. Improve myself and improve my understanding of how everything works. I think those are probably the two best things. Also, I guess also another element of it is like through improving myself and through understanding more, I help everything be better in the entire creation.
Yeah, I think I can certainly pull up to that. In the end, it's us working on ourselves.
Yeah.
But how can that not be helping the collective?
Sure. But I think also like that's something that is mentioned in a lot of ritual, including like Trithemius's method for drawing spirits into crystals, where when you have like the prayer of like let's bring this spirit forth, you include in it like, I'm not doing this to hurt anybody. I'm doing this for the greater welfare of things. And I think that that's a really important part. Like the greater welfare of all things is a huge part of magic, and and that's something that it took me a long time to kind of wrap my head around, and I came to it, I should have caught on a little earlier. I feel like when I look back, I'm kind of like, why didn't I realize that sooner? That would have been a good thing to.
Right, I'm the same way. Like I could be like level 50 by now.
Oh, absolutely.
I know. It's like I knew this shit when I was a kid, when I was goofing around at 12 years old, whatever. It's like, I know. It's
but you
frustrating.
Just try to. Yeah, and part of that is culturally. Our culture totally does not teach you to go out and be a good person. It's like you got to get ahead.
Yeah.
You got to make money. You gotta be a productive member of society. But most of all, you have to get ahead of everybody else. And when you really sort of stop and step back, you're kind of like, I don't really have to get ahead of everybody else. Like I need maybe like a banana and and a great place to sleep. But
exactly.
Well, doesn't it seem like a big redirect? It seems like we're just being energy is just totally being taken off of.
It's distraction. It's managed distraction.
For sure. Maybe not even managed.
Yeah, right. True.
I mean, we do it. We do it for ourselves because the alternative, the part where we have to spend time being introspective and trying to improve ourselves, is painful and difficult and maybe the hardest thing that you get to do in the world.
I agree.
I remember when I was a kid, when I was younger, I'll say, there wasn't much of the shaping like you described, that you got to get ahead. It certainly wasn't my parents, for my parents. In the world, absolutely. My bigger thing that came back at me like this, because I was an atheist, still am pretty much, but people would say, well, you're immoral, or how can you have morals or good morals or be a good person if you don't believe in God? Which always struck me as like the stupidest question to ask an atheist. But that was more
Well, it's a horrible reason to be a good person, actually. Like, because you're basically saying then that the reason you're a good person is because if you're not, you're going to get punished.
Right.
Yeah, someone told me to be good. I have to be good, or they're going to send me to the room that's full of fire. And it's like, that's the worst reason to be good. You're not actually being good. You're just pretending at that point. Like, everybody, from the most staunch atheist to the most devout religious person, if you're being good, you need to be being good for that sense of goodness, for the goodness. You're being out of the essence of goodness.
It's more than that, though. You're not a psychopath.
Punishment.
Right. Punishment.
Right,
yeah,
totally.
Exactly. But I think there's also a mentality that goes with some people that just they want to be that way, or they want to be bad.
Yeah.
Do you think they want to be? I mean, sometimes I wonder, like,
driven to be whatever.
No, I definitely know people that seek to do bad, to go out and want to hurt people. I've known these kinds of people in dark alleyways in my life, and it just comes back to that old parable, and I don't know where it is. Lord knows it's probably from the Bible. You squeeze a lemon, you get lemon juice, that kind of thing. That's always
lemons in the Bible.
Well, I don't know. I don't know where it came from. Yes, lemons in the old world.
If they didn't, they'd have scurvy.
But still, what about that innate energy aspect of just your innate energy? I just know people that are innate. I know lots of people that consider completely unconscious sleepers, but they're really good people. They're just genuinely good people. And everything they do, there's a sense of graciousness and all this, just lovely people. Mm-hmm. And then I know people that, just seem to want to create pain and strife, and they somehow just seem to be innately of that energy, whatever that is. I'm not going to characterize it as a bad energy. It's part of everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easier for some people to be good. I don't necessarily know why. People that are bad, or that like seek to go out and do bad things, I don't know why they do that either. I'm not sure what causes that kind of. I mean, to me, I know this is super judgy, but to me, it looks like a weakness of character. It looks to me like somebody who is afraid to be good. Like this is it's totally not tied to a dream or anything, but it is tied to like one of the things that my magical practice brought me to was this place that I remember it very distinctly. Where I made a decision. Like, I don't think that I was a super bad person. I didn't always do good things, and I wasn't like always honest and always, as good as I could be. But I remember sort of like making a decision one day and having this sort of realization, like, oh God, you just have to like be good. It's not, there's no special thing you have to do anything. It's just like a light switch got flipped, and I was like, oh, it's just a decision you make. You're like, oh, I'm good now. I'm going to be good.
But that still doesn't address good. That still doesn't answer that whole thing of like, I will know you by the fruit you bear. That whole concept I'm getting at.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't really have a good answer to that. People are very confusing to me. Other people.
Oh, me too.
I mean, I'm pretty confusing to me too, but other people are super confusing.
Yes. So they're odd behaviors. Definitely. I understand
that. I ponder these things a lot. I'm always trying to understand. I understand, like, through psychology and analysis, things like participation mystique, where, the group mentality, right? One person does it, then three, and then it's likely the whole crowd will. And so I get those things psychologically, chewing on them as fodder, but then when you start parsing out, it's my dog itching. Lucien's playing again. Then you start parsing out, so we stop looking at the crowd as just faceless people, and we start plucking out individuals, and we see storylines and likes and dislikes and all this, and it becomes a more detailed painting, if you will, to start seeing faces on people in crowds and start seeing storylines and interactions. And because I find it's easy to talk in large broad strokes about groups of people, and that gives us a detached judginess. That whole judgy quality can come when we detach ourselves from, right? So there's no face. I don't know. I've also wondered, that was just a weird sidetrack, sorry. I also wondered, like, if we look at like the whole Indian thing, Eastern Indian thing, and the karma and also the reincarnation, the person, so the scenario here is a person murders another person. Well, what if through a larger scope of timelessness that was actually coming round? The person that got murdered, that looks so horrific here and now, was actually getting payback.
Well,
right?
I would say in that sense, the murderer is probably also getting payback. So both of them are dealing with some sort of karmic leftover. One of them ends up in a place where they're committing some sort of horrific crime that probably stains them for the rest of their life and causes them torment for the rest of their days. And the other one gets murdered. Like, they're both having a super bad day. Nobody's having a good day in that sense. So if karma is a real thing, then in that sense, I would say both of those people are dealing with some karmic debt.
Yeah, it's interesting, like when we do put it to that lens, or that, throw on that reel. And
is it possible that karma is nothing more than a belief system?
Absolutely.
And, and because of that,
yes.
It's real. It instills itself, and it manifests because it's such a widely held belief.
Yeah, it could be. I'm pretty ignorant of Hinduism and how stuff like karma and dharma and all that stuff interact, but I feel like, and I could be totally wrong about this, I feel like that there's this sort of like Western popular image of karma, which is that things that you do are immediately going to be paid back. And then there's this, but the original karma was more like you have this kind of like bank account of deeds that affects your reincarnated life, right? Like you accrue it, and then you have to work it off in your next life, or
it's like a bill.
That's the Hindu version.
Yeah,
I think it's probably something in between.
Yeah, and so like in the, I think that we also have like the concept of like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
So in the Western world, like our religions, our hereditary religions, especially Judaism and Christianity, maybe Islam, I don't know, are really obsessed with guilt and sort of like the moral weight of your deeds. And we have, now like a lot of people sort of like shed those traditional religions and embrace sort of, new age religion or alternative religions, but
they're just different cages though.
They are, but this concept of
the fear and the guilt, it's going away.
The fear and the guilt it's cultural though, like it's built into our culture now, and so they find something else, like the westernized idea of karma that encourages them to somehow inspire their own punishment or reward based on the amount of guilt that they're feeling subconsciously.
But
I'm totally also, talking out of my ass.
I hear you, but that's in a way the karma in that sense is a guilt generator, because you worry about doing things ahead of time. It's more of a thought crime monitor in that way.
Yeah, and it might even be completely subconscious, where you do something and you're like, oh, I don't feel bad about what I did. You feel bad about what you did on some level, and therefore end up somehow creating a situation where you get punished later on.
Sure. But this kind of ties back into magic then, in that, in a way, like specifically with the self-fulfilling prophecy, you're really talking about programming your subconscious to make it happen.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, for sure. Like it ties into how chaos magic works, and like the psychological model of chaos magic. Yeah, I completely would agree with that.
Yeah, it's neat how it ties together. So I mean, it just goes to show that religions are just another form of magic.
Oh,
but not
absolutely.
Not for you.
Do our YouTube viewers, our live viewers, do they ever ask questions? Do
they
have any,
do.
like,
I will ask. We're about that time right now.
Yeah, let's look at some questions.
Somebody did ask before.
Jerry,
sorry, go ahead. Someone asked what your favorite magical system. I don't remember what it was.
My favorite magical system. I don't really have a favorite magical system.
Or what kind you practice, I think is what they asked.
Oh. Well, I started off, I think I mentioned earlier that I probably started off with like stuff that was sort of like Wicca and then neo-shamanism. I moved into sort of like solitary Golden Dawn based on things like Donald Michael Craig's book. I got really turned off of that when I started studying like Hermetic Kabbalah more and became really disillusioned with how kind of shallow it was. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on in Hermetic Kabbalah, but it's mostly what I ended up calling like the Hode trap, where it's all like occupying your brain with like colors and associations and correspondences and all this stuff that did nothing to sort of fill in kind of the big vacuous gaps behind the meanings that I was seeing. And that might have been something that could have been solved by actually like joining the Golden Dawn, but instead I started looking into older stuff. So first I started off with Agrippa. I started looking at kind of like Renaissance and medieval Kabbalah. So I guess nowadays I'm mostly, everything kind of combines together as you do it. So the stuff that I do, I guess, is an amalgamation of all the stuff that I've learned in the past. But what's probably influencing me the most or driving me the most currently is Renaissance magic, in particular, like Renaissance grimoire stuff. And then I just started working with the Greek magical papyri, which we talked about earlier. So I anticipate that will be influencing me a lot.
Yeah, the PGM's real neat. I have Skinner's book, and I'm waiting for his practical PGM to come out someday. He says he's working on it.
I wouldn't wait. Yeah, I've heard him talk about working on it too, but I wouldn't wait. I would dive in. Like, there's so much cool stuff in there. Yep. You just gotta experiment. It'll either work or it won't. You know what I mean?
Plus, his book makes it easy. I mean, not easy, but easy to get around.
I understand. I know. I have to read it another 2 or 3 times before I'll be ready to do it.
Yeah, I have that feeling too. I'm not reading the PGM straight through. I mean, I am reading the PGM straight through, but mostly I read Skinner's book straight through.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh, look at this, spells that have to do with ensouling statues. I'm going to look at those up. And, so I find the ones that I want to do, and I study those, and I combine it with, techniques that I've learned in the past or things that I've learned in the past.
I heard an interview with the guy, I forget who it was though, talking about ensouling statues. It might have been Gordon White even, that I don't remember if he was suggesting or surmising, or could it be kind of question about the statues of the gods were created to actually house that entity. I
think that if we look
like
at
in ancient Rome, ancient Greece.
I don't know about ancient Rome and ancient Greece, but I think in Egypt, in particular, we have some pretty good evidence from extant texts. In particular, I'm thinking about the Asclepius, where there's a whole section about like how statues were built to sort of like hold elements or be ensouled by the gods. And I think we see a little bit about that in the Corpus Hermeticum as well. And the funny thing is, like, you also get the sense in the Asclepius that that part of it is sort of like you make these statues that can move, and the movement shows that they have been ensouled. There's a passage that specifically says something like, everything that moves under its own power contains a soul, which I thought was kind of cool.
Intense.
Yeah, it is pretty intense. So every remote control car you've ever owned has a soul.
That's hilarious.
Every vibrator.
Every vibrator has a soul.
Oh my God. Oh Lord. There's something about that reminds me of Gollum too, right?
I thought of that too.
Yeah.
That hit me.
It totally is. Yeah. And yeah, for sure. So that's gonna be interesting in coming years as robots become more common and that sort of thing.
Well, if you've ever read, I forget which book it was, but it was Heinlein, Robert A. Heinlein. Robert Heinlein.
I've read everything he wrote, actually.
I think it's in Stranger in a Strange Land, but there's a passage in there where he describes the thought that a complex electromechanical system can house a consciousness if it grows to a certain point.
Oh yeah, well, Asimov talks about that with the positronic brains in his robot detective series, and I think Heinlein discusses it a little bit. Isn't that in the Moon is a Harsh Mistress?
Maybe, I don't remember which. I don't remember which book it was.
With Mike, the artificial intelligence that lives on the moon.
Is that the one with the AI named Solace too?
Oh, I have no idea. I don't remember. I've read all of them, but only a couple of them have I read more than once. But
yeah, I know they're old. I know. No, it's just an interesting thought if you apply it to, say, the internet.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yes, indeed.
And then
I mean, we've since discovered that there is nothing that does not move. Everything moves. We just can't always see it.
Right. But if you think about quantum computers. And the processors in those, the scientists or the developers say is communicating with another dimension, essentially, right? But what if it's just that the CPU is so complicated or so complex and it's electrical mechanical that it has a consciousness in it, and they're not really talking to another universe; they're just talking to one other aspect of that consciousness.
That could be. Yeah. I think I've even read some stuff that's hypothesized that our own minds, that thought in our own minds takes advantage of the quantum nature of matter, which is cool, and it makes sense, but I don't get it.
And it also goes along. Well, it doesn't go along. It kind of does. I mean, okay. What I'm thinking is that earlier you had said something about non-local consciousness, and we're just transceivers, basically. I'm fully on board with that. So in that sense, maybe some of your ideas and thoughts aren't actually yours, but they're everyone's, and you just tuned into it, right?
I feel like I'm probably stealing most of my thoughts from Nish right now.
You might be.
Damn you, Erik.
But that's kind of what I forgot now.
You're a vampire. I knew it.
I forgot what you said before that reminded me of that, but it's the same thing, just stated a different way.
Yeah, we talked about. You're probably referencing what we talked about when Nish asked me about the nature of consciousness and what I thought that was.
No, I was referring just now. You just said something that reminded.
Oh yeah.
So.
Oh, okay.
It's all good.
So wait, what about our YouTube?
I'll look back if we had any more
watchers.
questions.
Do they have any more cool questions? Let's see what we got.
I'm going to bed. Good night.
What a wimp.
Yes. So what kind of question is that?
Oh, I know someone asked me earlier if you knew anything or how much you'd researched MK Ultra.
Nearly zero. I know that it existed. I've read a few little things about it, but I know pretty much nothing about it. I'm not super big on conspiracy theories anymore.
That's what I told them.
Yeah.
Where?
I like laughing at them. I think that most of them are very, very entertaining. And I love that we spend a lot of time getting obsessed over things that we have so little control over.
Well, that's a big thought because those things, but then you can apply that to a lot of stuff in life in general.
So Lee wanted to know what your opinion of Enochian magic was.
I find Enochian magic to be super interesting. I haven't explored it a whole lot. I've used a little bit just in whatever, I can't remember, the Watchtower ritual, whatever it is that Donald Michael Craig teaches in his book. I haven't explored it a whole lot beyond that. I've read some stuff about Dee and Kelly. I think that their system is incredibly complex, and because of that, it's a little too much work for me to really get into, especially with the stuff that you read that has to do with you have to do everything perfectly.
Yeah. I'm totally intimidated by it. I've got anything that was published by John Dee all that. I've got all the material. I just am completely intimidated by doing any working.
Oh, we should
I
do.
would say that
Sorry.
I don't find it intimidating, but I find it exhausting to think about doing. I'm like, oh my God, you have to do what? Oh, you have
Maybe
to do
I'm
what?
intermingling that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could be. It's not that I'm definitely not afraid to do stuff, but it looks too tedious.
But one could argue
really,
that you
really
guys
tedious.
are too lazy to deserve that level of magic. In a way.
I will totally wear that jacket.
Oh, so would I. I'm just saying, you have to earn it. I mean, if you want to do it, you have to earn it, and that's part of it.
I guess I'm not sure what is left to be gotten out of the Enochian system. I don't know what people are necessarily doing with it now, but
going insane,
to
probably.
me, yeah. Well, I mean, I have my own. There's elements of my own practice that involve like conjuring spirits and speaking to spirits and that sort of stuff, which started out from a system and then evolved as I learned more from them. And I mean, maybe someday somebody will look back at whatever I've written down and be like, oh God, the Arnesonian system is so tedious.
Oh my God, Erik.
That brings up
all you got to do is spit in a can of Pepsi and say these magic words and everything's fine.
Beer in a can of beer.
So you just maybe you're asking. I got a question now. So
okay,
what have you learned from your spirits that has altered what you've learned about magic? Where have they turned you in another path, or added, or augmented, improved, even, or hurt?
I would say that a lot of that sort of stuff is very personal, and I would encourage people to sort of figure that out on their own. But
I don't need specific examples. I
can give a few examples though. If I am performing a large working or a ritual that's like tied to a particular planet or is doing something in specific, and I have a spirit that I've already have a relationship with that is somehow tied to that, I will ask it for advice and be like, am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? And they will help.
There's nothing like permanent, nothing's altered your practice.
A little bit, I guess. For instance, I don't draw a circle on the floor. I've had enough. You
have protection. You have protection built in.
I have protection built in.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, most of it has to do with the amount of time and investment I put into other workings before that, right? Like, I didn't actually start doing the whole like spirit summoning thing until I had already been doing like ceremonial magic for probably at least 10 or so years, maybe more than that. So I already had other techniques and other practices that were ready and strong enough or whatever that when I started working on it, they were, the feedback I got or the results I got showed that I was doing it right, or right for me. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Yeah. And I wasn't,
okay.
I didn't want to make you defensive about it. I was curious. I'm really looking for what do the spirits think of the ways people use magic? Like, do they laugh and like, okay, we'll do it this time, but you know what I mean?
Oh,
like, how would they alter your
like
practice to?
Totally depends on which one you're talking to and what they're tied to and how they're related to things. Like some of them might not give a shit. Some of them might get too interested. Some of them might, it's
a slippery slope.
Yeah, they're as varied as human beings, or something like that.
They're as varied as AIs.
Yeah, they're as varied as artificial intelligences.
Okay, thoughts on chaos? Do you have any thoughts on chaos magic and why it doesn't get mentioned as much these days as 10 to 20 years ago?
I do, actually. I think that one of the reasons that chaos magic doesn't get mentioned as much is because the paradigm of chaos magic is super strongly tied into the psychological model of magic. And the psychological model has really been falling out of favor over the last couple of decades. I'm really happy to see it go myself. I bought into it at the beginning, and honestly, like, I barely use chaos magic. I've used it in the past to great effect, but it's not. There's a lot of stuff in chaos magic that's just tied to thaumaturgy, right? Which is the ability to like make changes in the physical world. Right. But it's always sort of framed in this idea of like, oh yeah, you do this thing and it's going to embed it in your subconscious, and that.
Hi, Jerry.
Hey.
We're talking
I asked him about spirits and what he thinks they are,
and the nature of spirits, and then she tried to trap me in some afterlife talk.
Oh,
totally that's a good question. I am curious what your thoughts on spirits are, and then I want to circle back about what Jake Stratton Kent says about his thought.
Okay. Well, so I honestly, like I was just saying with Nish, I don't have a really strong opinion of that yet, except that I feel like they need to be treated like they're external entities. But I do think that some of the spirits or things that I call spirits that I've interacted with are parts of me. And then Nish was asking about how this might tie into my thoughts on the afterlife. And I haven't done a whole lot of exploration of that, so I don't know. But I do know that like in Ashin Chassan's book, Journey Through Giant Blue Book.
Yes.
It's a great book. Some of the spirits he contacts and has conversations with are like, I used to be a person, and then this bizarre thing happened to me, and now I am a blah 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 instead. I personally have not had that experience or that conversation or that input, but I also haven't looked for it, so I don't know. I'm still kind of new to the spirit stuff and figuring out what they are. I'm more interested in, I guess I haven't really explored what their nature might be, mostly because I'm not sure that I would be able to get a good answer yet. Maybe someday.
Yeah, they won't tell you.
Or if they do tell me, I might not be able to understand it, right?
Or
like it's
right. Or
yeah. When it's a good practice to treat them as external, just as a precaution, and also that allows one to garner the dialogue. So even if it is an aspect of yourself, what it is you're in dialogue with yourself, that aspect, and so that can only be good.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully.
Well, I mean, it can be dark, certainly, but there's, you get it out and you look at it via a projection of something.
I think it was Gordon White who asked him what he thought they were. Jake Stratton Kent. And he said he thought they were the stars.
Oh, interesting.
Which is a beautiful way of looking at it. Maybe they are like talking to the stars.
I thought it was really nice.
Next is Dancing with the Stars.
No, thank you. And Venus is doing a tango.
I've spent far too long in the jungles of Costa Rica once, and while I was
this
there,
sounds juicy.
You're gonna be super disappointed. While I was there, I spent a lot of time watching television because it was fairly boring, and it was super hot and sweaty all the time.
That's terrible.
One of the only television shows in English was Dancing with the Stars.
Oh my God.
So I did watch possibly a whole season of Dancing with the Stars.
Oh, Erik. You had no books? Jeez.
I ran out of books. There was
my
no way to
goodness.
get new books.
That is a version of hell.
It was a version
no
of
books,
hell.
And you're stuck with Dancing with the Stars. Ay.
I don't know what I did wrong there. I think I was karmically punishing myself. But...
Yeah, that was some bill paid. Jesus.
I'm doing better. Doing better now.
Yes, you are. All right. Do we have any more questions, Chair?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Here we go.
Okay, Lee, you've asked too many questions. Please stop.
Oh, wait. Who's Lee?
Hi, Lee.
Lee would love to talk to you for hours and hours. Lee would like to know your thoughts on something, which I'll ask after this one. Do you like weird fiction?
Oh, man. I love weird fiction. Yes.
Examples?
Yeah, give us an example.
Oh man. Well, it's hard to know what other people consider weird, but probably my favorite weird fiction recently is that I finished reading is John Crowley's Egypt series, which just totally blew my mind. I loved it. I also really enjoyed. Oh God, I'm having a difficult time remembering this guy's name. Fowler, who wrote The French Lieutenant's Woman.
Yes.
Oh God, I love that book.
Some of his novels are just really weird, and I love them. I also just recently, a couple years ago, I got this book from when I was at the Esoteric Book Conference in Seattle called The Hole Behind Midnight. And it was about this strange, weird, magical world that I thought was super brilliant. I really, really liked that.
That title's amazing.
Oh man, it's such a good book.
The Hole Behind Midnight. Love that.
Any relation to Alistair, this John guy?
No, he's pretty amazing. Actually, if you want to get a good dose of him, the first ever episode of the Culture podcast is an interview with him. And he's brilliant. He's incredible.
Oh yeah, I think I might have heard that. Ryan's awesome, by the way.
Oh, he is. Yes, I like that guy. What else? I mean, so much fiction is weird. Especially when you pay closer attention to it, it just gets more and more bizarre. You know, I mean, I've read Illuminatus trilogy more than once, and I've owned it probably a dozen times, but it's one of those books where you're always like, have you read this? And nobody's ever going to finish the damn thing. It's friggin' humongous, right? So you either read it when you were super stoned in college, or you will never read it. And you'll just borrow it from somebody, and it will sit there like a karmic guilt bucket on your shelf forever, where you always look at it and be like, that book is huge and super weird. I'm never going to read it, and I'm never going to give it back.
Oh, man.
I read it for the first time when I was 12 or 13, and a lot of times after that, right?
That explains everything, Jerry.
Oh, it does. That explains a lot. So what do you think the squirrel means? Like, it opens with the squirrel. What is that about?
I haven't read it in a long time. I can't tell you. That's what I was going to say, is the only thing I remember from that. I mean, I remember the storyline, but the thing that stands out most in my mind is the paragraph about the leader of the United States and how he can achieve orgasm in the mouth of a skilled prostitute in 90 seconds. And then like 3 or 4 pages later, they're talking about the leader of China, exact same paragraph. Yeah. And then later on a little more, there's the leader of Russia, exact. It's like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
Wilson
used the power of repetition.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it was showing the puppetry also in that they're all they're all straw men. They're just they're all the same.
So here's one of my favorite things about fiction in general. So like, if a piece of fiction is good enough and influential enough, it ends up being sort of considered literature, right? And I love reading literature that ends up being weird, where you're like, this piece of fiction is so important that it's been considered like a foundational element of our culture. And that stuff, like that literature, is oftentimes really, really worth going to explore, because a lot of it just has some super bizarre stuff in it. Possibly the best example is the end of Grapes of Wrath. Like the closing scene of Grapes of Wrath. You read the last page of Grapes of Wrath, and your first thought after that is like, where's the rest of the book? Did they like rip pages out? Like, did this book really just end on some lady who just had a miscarriage nursing some starving old man in a barn? Like, that's the last scene. Weird.
I have that one on my shelf. I
noticed that almost every book I had to read, because it was a classic or whatever from school, was terrible. I really didn't enjoy them as much as the other books I was reading. And nor did
but I mean, a lot of
like Pride and Prejudice, I would say, was probably the best. That was a classic that
I don't think I've read that
description. It's really good.
But there's some other classic ones. Like, you go back to Victorian fiction. I actually really enjoy Victorian fiction, because there are all of these like hidden gems that just sort of scrape away at like the weird underbelly of Victorian society, where you're like, what the hell is going on in this book? What's the book with Svengali in it? Trilby, for instance.
Yes.
It's a great book, because there's this whole story going on, but in the background there's this like hypnotist mind controlling the main character, and it's a friggin' weird ass tragedy. that nobody ever talks about now. Like, well, you'll hear the word Svengali tossed around, but nobody really knows what it means.
Right.
Vanity Fair is another good one. Like Vanity Fair.
Oh, that's dark.
Nobody is a good person in that book.
It's very dark.
Like it's a book full of shitty people doing shitty things to each other in Victorian society, all being super proper and blah 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 blah. And it's like, and that's literature.
But see, that this is what's great about context to time and a period. The Victorian period was completely repressed. And so all this dark stuff was seeping out in the literature, in the furniture, in the clothing. I mean, it was just, and we have the birth of that whole spiritual movement. All of it was just seeping out anywhere it could while they were maintaining being proper and corseted, and that's what made it so juicy, that period.
Oh, yeah. There's a new show, or I think it's a new show on Netflix called The Frankenstein Chronicles.
Oh, yeah. I watched a couple episodes of that.
Yeah.
It looked pretty good.
That's Victorian-ish. Dark, yeah, you got the whole dark underbelly of child trafficking going on, or whatever the hell's going on. I haven't gotten that far in it. But
was that written in the Victorian period, or is it written, is it a period piece? It's
a period piece. It's new.
It is, but it centers around Mary Shelley, so... in a way.
Yeah.
I haven't watched it. So far, it's kind of centering around
But still, the stuff of the period is where you get to see all that.
Right, but I think a lot of Frankenstein was allegory for what was going on in the period.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So, with the interaction of the detective in the story and Mary Shelley herself, he's finding out this stuff from her, not the book.
There's another author I want to mention, and I'm having a really difficult time remembering his name, but I think I have one of his books.
I remember reading a really good book. I think it was, I want to say it was Neil Stephenson, but I think it was called The Difference Engine.
There. Oh, that was Bruce Sterling.
Bruce Sterling, thank you. Yeah, that was a good book about Charles Babbage.
Yeah. Actually, I think it was maybe Sterling and
someone else. Yeah. Like
Gibson,
right? Yes.
I think they were working together on that. Okay, the other author I want to mention is John Banville, and he's written a number of really fascinating books. But the ones that I really love are sort of his historical fiction ones, which take really influential people, sometimes scientists and stuff, and he just makes this whole world about them, and they end up being pretty weird and pretty dark, but those are really worth looking into. In particular, the two that I think I enjoyed the most were Kepler and Dr. Copernicus. So go look those up, people. Enjoy those books.
Oh, you just reminded me again. There's another thing on Netflix, or it might be on Amazon, I don't remember. It's called like Jonathan Norell. Oh man, I forgot it. It's about these two...
that's based on a book, Dr. Jonathan Strange and Dr. Norell.
Yes, excellent, really excellent.
I love book nerds. Hello, unite.
That book was incredible, and the TV series that they made out of it was pretty good too.
It was awesome.
I'm looking forward to it.
Well, it's just a little synchro, not really synchro, but the first trick that Norell does is animate those statues.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, yes.
Ooh.
There we have it. Right? As Erik has a swig of wine.
We'll just bring the show full circle and call it a night. How's that?
I'm just pretending. This works for me. Wait, are there any more questions? I want to make sure that people get a chance to ask their weird questions.
I asked for last call, and I think I asked you the last one.
Okay, cool. Great.
Beware foundational literature. Yes, I agree.
No, definitely.
Beware foundational
Just
literature.
Beware. Wake up.
That's a good bumper sticker. Beware foundational literature.
Yeah, someone's talking about how much they hated Catcher in the Rye. That's the kind of crap literature that we had to read, like that. And
that's not even a weird book.
Thoreau, that's just on Walden Pond. God, what a horrible book. Anyway, Erik, would you like to
plug?
Whatever they call that. Plug stuff.
What do you have going on, Erik?
Oh, well, I've got a podcast, My Alchemical Bromance, which is about beer and the occult. I'm on Twitter as Arnemancy, Arnemancy. I'm on Steemit as Reverend Erik. And that's possibly everything.
All right.
Thank you guys for having me on.
Thanks for joining us. It's been an awesome talk.
It's been a great pleasure, and big love to the chat. Of course, you all know I'm not out in the chat. But thank you, Erik. This has been a great pleasure. And thank you, Jerry.
And thank you, Nish. And thank you, everyone watching. And stay tuned. Next week, we've got, I believe we have Kalendal next week. That should be interesting.
Yay!
Yeah. Looking forward to talking to him.
Kalendal.
All right, everyone.
All right.
Have a great night. And thanks for tuning in. Take